since we've got our go live. We've got a 20-second lag as usual.
Okay.
Welcome everyone to the resumption of CorinCon Cubed, our CorinCon continuing content series, so awkwardly named because, you know, that's how I live my life. Today we are welcoming the delightfully talented Erica Drayton, EL Drayton. Sorry, was that? Are you?
No, that's fine.
Okay, either one.
There's a short story behind why I am EL Drayton as my author name instead of as Erica Drayton, and it has to do with URLs.
Oh yeah.
To teach a valuable lesson to those who want to be an author and purchase your URL when you're in high school and you don't realize the importance of keeping said URL when it expires. I had ericadrayton.com. I gave up ericadrayton.com and hence EL Drayton.
Yay! Because otherwise it's like $300 to get it back.
No, it turns out I'm worth close to $700.
Woo, nicely done.
Which, you know, I get to know my worth now if I wanted to purchase it from whatever third party,
right?
Computerized whatever purchased ericadrayton.com. But yeah, so I ended up now using my middle name. And I go by eldrayton.com, which I guess works out, you know.
Sure.
So that's, although some people see the URL and think it's L Drayton, like ELL.
Oh yeah, El Drayton.
Yes, but yeah. So that's long story short why I am EL Drayton. But it's okay if people know I'm Erica Drayton because my Twitter is Erica Drayton, my YouTube, you know, all of my social media is Erica Drayton, and it's mostly because I don't want to confuse people when they see it and they think it's El Drayton and it's not Erica Drayton, but you know.
Well, fair enough. Hey, I mean, lots of people use pen names. There are plenty of people who would just be using EL Drayton because they thought it was cool. So, you know, I think it's probably all good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Erica. So everyone who's tuning in, you may recognize or remember Erica from our original CorinCon event, as she was one of our tech coordinators for the entire event. So if you were on any of our panels or attended any of our events live, you may have seen her or heard her or seen her name in the comments, etc. And Erica was a massive help during CorinCon, and thank you again for that. We haven't really hung out much since then.
No, we haven't. And like, to think that it wasn't too long ago, but it feels like it was ages ago.
Right?
And I was saying to my wife, because I was like, I'm doing this interview. I was like, remember last year when I helped Virginia? And then I was like, wait, that wasn't last year. That was like less than 6 months ago, actually.
Yeah, it was April. Or April? Yeah, it was April. So that was 6 months ago, but it was also 25 years ago. So that's totally
yes. We have all aged tremendously in the last
understandable
8 months.
So yeah. Well, that's but it's been an insane year since then. But you're doing all right. We were just talking about how you're doing, and I don't know what level of detail you want to go in publicly, but you're doing okay, more or less.
Yeah, I was in West Hollywood, Los Angeles, which is like the hotbed and the hip spot to be in, if you're living in LA, but not if you're living in LA during a pandemic and riots. It's actually not where you want to be. And when my job, you know, decided after the pandemic to say, you will be able to work from home permanently. We will never force you to come back into the office. That was kind of like, where shall we go? And we literally Googled the 10 safest places to live in the United States. Like literally that was what we did. And then we said, well, let's see what I could afford, you know, credit wise, finances wise. And it turns out I could afford a pretty big house in upstate New York. So,
wow. So there you are.
So we literally packed the dogs and packed up some U-Haul boxes and drove cross country from West Hollywood, Los Angeles to upstate New York in, I want to say 10 days.
Dang.
And that was only because we stayed over in one city that we really liked. Don't ask me which one, because we were in a different state every day. But it might have been Cleveland. No, Cleveland was the worst. It was Indianapolis. That's where it was. It was Indianapolis. We stayed, no offense to any Clevelanders, but we were in downtown Cleveland and it was not good.
Fair enough.
We woke up at 4 a.m. and we booked it. Like we were like, get the hell out of Dodge. But anyway, it was Indianapolis. We stayed over for like 2 days and to give our bodies a rest from driving, especially since I don't drive. So my wife did all the driving.
All the driving. Okay. Yeah.
So really it was to give her a rest, not me. But yeah. So we did it. We're here. We're not fully unpacked. We only just got here. We literally moved in September 25th.
September. Okay. End of September. Yeah.
Yeah. But we arrived in New York September 1st. So we were living in a hotel for almost a month.
Ooh.
Then we moved in.
Good times.
It was exciting. It was stressful. It was a lot, but we can go out without wearing a mask.
Ooh.
There was so many positives to where we are. There's no rioting.
Right.
The population is literally like 300 people.
Right.
We've got like cows, horses, and buggies out here. Like we are in the middle of nowhere.
Wow. Buggies, are you in Amish country? Is that
there is an Amish family that lives in this village. We are literally in a village. I live in a village.
Yeah.
So there is an Amish family who drive around with black horses and a black buggy, which is scary at 10 o'clock at night when you're thinking the headless horseman is trotting by, but then you realize, it's just the Amish people.
Right. Hey.
So you're fine.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, just last week we had 4 deer like across the street and they came and hung out in our backyard, which was for like an hour. It was like amazing. So it's great.
That's awesome.
It's definitely not city living, but I'll take it.
Oh yeah. No, country living, city living, two very different things, but both have their perks. And in a pandemic, country living, I could see why that's and civil unrest. Like I could see why why that would be the choice you would make.
And the heat in LA was like triple digits.
Yeah.
It was unbearable.
I am not one to complain about heat. I grew up in Phoenix and I don't mind the triple digits, but I totally get that a lot of people do. So but well, congrats on the move. That's exciting. And wow, you're gonna go into, do you have much experience with New England winters? Are you
I do. Okay. I went to college in New Hampshire where it snows like 10 months out of the year. I'm very familiar with it. Ready to go.
Great. Awesome. Well, then it'll be nothing new to you. Awesome. Well, you're well prepped then. Well, we should probably just dive into some questions.
Yeah, sure.
And try to I mean, I think we'll have time to get through them all. I, as you are sure are aware, have a tendency to ramble and get sidetracked. So I have rarely in these interviews managed to either contain them to 90 minutes or get through all of the questions. It's like an either or proposition, and I'm not very good at either one. But we'll see if we can do it. It's like a new challenge every time.
Okay. I'm up for it.
And I like, as I've mentioned before on here for people watching, I like to do a combination of conversation that's actually about the interviewee's area of expertise, but also some slightly frivolous things as well. So to start with, we're going to hit the hardest hitting question. What are your doggos' names and what types of doggos are they?
Okay, so I have 2 dogs and they are fancily called Brussels Griffons.
Ooh.
Which, if you've ever seen the movie As Good as It Gets, it's the dog in that movie.
Okay.
Very expensive, very needy, very attention driven. One is, the oldest is Fletcher, he's 3. And then we have Rocky, and she is 2.
Oh, okay.
They're both the same breed. They're different though. One is a black smooth coat, and the other is a red rough coat. But they're both the same breed. Yeah,
that's neat. Well, that's fun. Those sound like good upstate New York dogs.
Well, they're getting used to the snow. They're definitely not dogs built for snow. They're very small, so they're under 15 pounds. So.
Right. So they disappear in the snow.
Well, we'll find out.
Dive in. Yeah, that's right.
One of them hasn't experienced snow till we moved here, so.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So it'll be a new thing for them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, cool. Thank you for sharing details about your pets. I love pets in general, and I particularly feel like in the pandemic, you know, I used to see a lot more people's pets in general in person, and now we only get to see them on camera, and I miss other people's dogs.
They do have an Instagram, but don't ask me what it is because I don't run it. My wife does, but they do have an Instagram.
You can post in the comments later if you like. I would love to go stalk your dogs later. Appreciate some dog photos. All right. So moving away from the totally frivolous questions and into a bit of the meatier topics for now. So you actually write or at least publish one short story per week from what I've gathered from your blog. So that's a lot of output. They're not short stories either. They're not like flash fiction or micro stories. They seem to all be upwards of like 1,000 words.
Right.
What do you do to help you keep up with that amount of content generation? And then how much editing goes into each story before you post it? How do you keep up with that schedule?
Well, I started out actually doing microfiction and short flash fiction. Okay. But my mind being the way it is, I could never contain myself to the confines of like 250, 750 words. So I eventually just evolved from that. And I gave myself the crazy goal in 2019 that in 2020, I was going to take a break from novel writing, which I had been doing for like the previous 3 years.
Yeah.
And I was going to take a break by writing and releasing one short story every week for 52 weeks. Wow. Because, you know, that's the kind of break you want to take when you don't want to write a novel anymore. I say that sarcastically because
I assumed, because I was like, man, that is more content generation or more,
right.
Like
little did I know what was going to happen in like March. Well, so, you know, so I tried as best as I could, and I will admit I made it through the 6th month. So by mid-June, it was a burnout. I mean, there was pandemic issues, work issues. We now were looking for house stuff, packing. Like there was no way that I was going to churn out what I wanted to. Yeah. So, but I always set myself up for those kind of failures. I mean, I feel like, don't we all? We think we are invincible. So it's like, I'm not going to write a novel. No, that's silly. I'm going to write 52 million words. That's going to come out to be 52 short stories, each self-contained and completely different. Wow. And it's going to be awesome. So yeah, but in terms of how I did it, in the beginning, and when I say in the beginning, it was like literally the first 2 months, because by March, all bets were off. I streamed, and streaming is very helpful in that regard because you are accountable to no one and to everyone when you're streaming. And they're complete and total strangers sometimes, but more often than not in the Twitch community, there are Twitch writers who are friends of Twitch writers who know each other. And so they know you're writing, you know, to keep up with a goal. So they try to keep you on your toes. You know, they might come in from time to time and make sure you're still writing. And even in your own mind, mentally, it's like, it's until you tell the world, you can totally not do what you set yourself up to do. So I try, when I have goals set out for myself like that at the end of the year, my New Year's resolutions, which I haven't yet done this year for next, but I will.
You got time. You got time. I think there's still 1 whole month left.
Right. I'll usually write a blog post. I'll do an Instagram image. I'll do whatever I can to kind of tell the world, this is my goal. So if I don't meet it, I know that I'm, like I said, I'm disappointing everyone and no one, because no one knows me, but someone out there saw that and it's kind of like, did you do it? Like, how far did you get? You know, that sort of thing. So I try to use that as my way of getting myself to write the story. And I love short fiction because it allows me to pick up an idea and then walk away from it when it's done.
Right.
And when I was writing novels, I was too involved. I was building the world too big. I was coming up with too many ideas for this self-contained place, to the point where I had outlined 60 plus novels that were broken out into 10 different mini series.
Right.
And it was graphic novels, children's books. And eventually I had to say, I can't, I'm gonna go crazy, because I was thinking up of more ideas than writing the story.
Right.
So I said, I need to take myself to a place where I'm going to come up with the idea, write the story, and then write the end.
Right.
And walk away.
Very good.
And I knew that I needed to do that for myself for a while before I could trust myself or learn to do that in a larger scale, but not so big that my mind was just going to be too bogged down with the minutia of the world building and not with the storytelling, which is what I want to do.
Gotcha.
So I decided to do the short fiction. I think I went a bit too far by saying I would do one every week, because there were times where a short story would be 700 words, but then I had some short stories that were 9,000 words. And it's like, I have to, there has to be some sort of compromise, and I really didn't have one. But I came out with, I think, some really good stuff, and I ended up doing a podcast from it as well. So
that's awesome.
And that's mostly because LeVar Burton reads and Reading Rainbow, and he has one. So I said, I want to read my stories.
Yay.
No one will listen to them, but I want to read them and put them out there because I can. So I will.
Absolutely.
And as far as editing goes, I'll admit, I edit them myself. I use, Grammarly and like the pro writing aid and those sort of things. But in terms of hiring a publisher, you hear me? Hiring an editor to do that, I have not. And I think I did that intentionally because this is going to be fun for me and not work for me. And so I didn't want it to resemble anything near what I was doing when I was doing the novel stuff.
Totally.
It needed to be different. It needed to have a different coat of paint. I needed to know that I could write it and enjoy it and maybe edit it if I want to, but don't if I don't want to. I will be doing something different in 2021, but for 2020, that's all I wanted to do. Which is
I think that when you're creating weekly output like that, I think the expectations tend to be different from an audience too. Like if you're writing and posting a weekly short story, I think the expectations are pretty much that it be somewhat clean, but not that it be, and by clean, I mean, a Grammarly or pro writing aid type scan of it, not that it needs to be immaculate or that it needs to have had a developmental edit or any of that stuff. And
I mean, honestly, I was looking at web serials as an example on why I did it weekly. Because web serials will do 2 to 3 days a week, and they churn out, 5, 6, 7,000 words per episode 3 times a week. And I was just like, well, if they can do it, again, little did I realize when I did further research, this was what they were doing for a living. It wasn't like they were like me, 9 to 5, go to work, come home, have a little chunk of time. And, it was like, it's not feasible. So I had to, readjust my expectations there. But that's where it spawned from. I thought if these, well-known, well-crafted web serial people out there can just churn out 30,000 words a week, how hard could it be?
How hard indeed.
Turns out really hard.
Turns out really hard. Yep. Yeah. That's fair though. What is life if you don't get to occasionally commit yourself to way too big of a project and then find out the hard way that was more than you bargained for? That's the point. So at this juncture, how many short stories have you written? Not just this year, but in total, because it seems like a lot. I tried to count and failed.
It is. So, I try not to go back past, I would say 2016.
Okay.
And anything that I count is from 2016 forward.
Okay.
And I'm sure there's a psychological reason behind that, but for the purposes of this short interview, I will say I don't go past 2016.
Okay.
So
post 2016.
And you know what it probably is? 2016 is when I started streaming. So that's probably why I don't count anything beyond that. But quite honestly, when I started, I was writing 100-word stories.
Right.
And when I say 100, I mean exactly 100. They couldn't be a 101 or 99. They had the story had to be exactly 100 words.
100 words. Okay.
And
very strict microfiction.
Right. And I love the challenge of that. And then so I don't count that as short stories. So I've got about 40 of those, but I can't count those. And then I upgraded to about 250 words, exactly 250, because again, I like the challenge, but I won't count any of those either. So
I would.
I wrote 23 in 2020, because I almost did the halfway point, which would have been 26.
Right.
So I didn't write 26, and by June I only had 23. So we can count the 23, and then in 2019 I would add another 20 or so to that. So maybe 45 I would count legally. If
the lawyers showed up to count words and check if they fit the short story box.
Right. I would say 45.
Okay. All right.
Liberally speaking.
I would also count the microfiction personally, because I think that the microfiction and flash fiction are way harder.
They are,
to me, than a short story of any length, right? Like if the challenge is you can write a short story, it can be as long as you want it to be. That is way easier than you can write a short story, but it has to be either exactly 100 words or exactly 250 words. Like I find that razoring down to be.
And I loved doing those. Those are probably some of my favorite. And I realized that I think it was this year. I mean, so many things happened this year, but I think earlier this year, I realized I could take those 100 words and put it as an Instagram image, because it was so short and it fits right there. And I was just like, oh, I should go back to writing these. But I couldn't stray from the task. I was like, if I do that, then I'm not releasing a short story every week. So I did a few, I'll admit. I did kind of write maybe a dozen or so this year that fit into that category. But
count them. So you've written 33 stories this year, and now you only have to write 22 more in order to
in the next 4 weeks.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. Or fewer
no problem.
Than that. Yeah. 19.
Easy.
Yeah.
No problem.
You got this. No problem.
But yeah, so I love the challenge of that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I struggle. So actually, even with microfiction, I enjoy enough of the challenge that when I do set myself down to do it, I can manage that unit. I do find it exceedingly challenging, but when I decide that's like, okay, this is what I'm going to do, I can do it and it's fun. And I actually started a Patreon that was, the whole premise was going to be flash fiction that was between, I think I set myself 50 to 150 words or whatever. But anyway, totally failed at doing that. But that's neither here nor there. But even just like okay, Virginia, you can write a short story. It can be anything under 10,000 words. I struggle with not exploding those into novels. Like basically every short story I write, with the exception of one or two, every short story I've written has seemed to me like the opening chapters to a book. And basically
and quite honestly, of all the stories that I've written, only one did that to me. And I struggled the most with it. And then I started doing more research recently to look at what my 2021 goals are going to be, which is to actually publish my short stories, to get them published in publications and magazines and things. I'm actually going to submit. That's one of my goals for 2021. And it turns out a short story, the cap is 17,499 words. Lo and behold.
After that, it becomes a novella.
I was capping myself at 5,000 for my weekly ones, because I didn't want to go too crazy. And one of my stories, I'll just bring it up, is called The Lost Girls. And I think it might tie into a question you might have for me later on how I come up with these stories. But in this one, I wanted to do a fairy tale retelling because I love retellings. I can do a retelling. I did the Wizard of Oz retelling, and I'm going to
I saw that listed in your short stories. I was like, oh, I got to go read that one, but I didn't have time.
Yes, and I'm going to actually, I have all 15 books that J.M. Barrie wrote. A lot of people don't know that he actually, that it's actually a series of 15 books.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to read all 15, and then eventually I'm going to continue mine. It's not going to be like Wicked, because Wicked is a similar thing.
It's a different fan fiction.
Right. It's a different twist. But with the Lost Girls, I was like, I want to do a retelling where Tinkerbell is a badass. And instead of it being the Lost Boys with Peter Pan, it's going to be the Lost Girls where Tinkerbell is going to be the leader of this group of girls who she rescues from Peter Pan, who is not just taking boys, but taking any children that fall out of their pram, including girls.
Right.
But in any event, I was doing this outline, and the outline was 8,000 words. And I said,
that's probably not going to be a short story.
And I was like, what do I do? And so I went to all of my, like writer friends who knew that I was doing this challenge thing. And one of them looked at me on Twitch, because he streams on Twitch as well. And I asked him, and he looked into the camera and he said, did it ever occur to you to just write the novel? And I said, oh,
right.
No, it hadn't. I just don't want to skip it, because because what happens is when I write my short stories, you'll be surprised to know I had all 52 titles before the year started, because the way that I come up with my story, because each story is self-contained and different. So how could I possibly every week be expected to wake up on Monday and have Billy, Bob, and Joe ready to do a story, and then the next Monday have Carrie Ann and whatever, right? So what I like to do is a title takes me where I need to go easily. You give me a title, I'll give you a story in 5 minutes. And so I had 52 titles in order based on what I needed to do for February, where I knew it was going to be Valentine's. So I wanted a Valentine's-y type title there, et cetera, et cetera. So I was going through my list, and I was on the week of the Lost Girls, and I'm sitting there like, my God, I want to tell this badass story about Tinkerbell, but how do I do it in 5,000 words? And that was when the first hiccup happened, which was like, okay, I'm not going to meet my goal now, because it's past a week. I haven't released this story. Because I need to come to terms with, it's okay if you have a short story that just can't be a short story. That's just too good to not be a novella or a full-on novel.
Or a series, because I'm sorry, but Badass Tinkerbell to me sounds like a series. But
however, I will say that the Lost Girls is being recycled into 2021 now that I'm going to increase my word count to 17,000. With the caveat that I may not be able to tell the story in 17,000 words, but we're going to try.
Fair enough. You give it your best shot.
Yeah, thank you.
And I look forward to reading the first 5 chapters of what I'm sure will become a much larger story.
Okay, that's not helping me on my goals.
I'm sorry.
2021. But yeah, I'm a title person. I need a title.
Awesome.
When I have the title, then I write the story. And I try to have character names as well, because I can't do like, and I've been doing it a lot lately, where I'll say insert here, insert name here,
insert name here. Yeah. No, it's hard to build a person around that. I do that for like very minor side characters. Sometimes I'm like, come up with name later, because it doesn't actually matter. All they're doing is handing somebody a box or whatever, right? But like, but yeah, for most characters, I do full character sheets, even for supporting characters. But
are you like me, where you need the title? Like I literally cannot even write. If I have an idea for a story, I will stop myself in the middle of the idea and say, what is the title of this thing? Because I cannot move forward. And you know what it is? I am OCD, and I cannot create a Word document or a file folder that says unnamed. What is that?
That is unacceptable.
How do
it's clearly named unnamed. This is a paradox.
I need a title. And so ever since I can remember, it's like I have the title, I'm gone. The title is all I need, and I've got a story.
Interesting. Yeah, it depends. Some short stories I have come up with the title first and the story later. And like 1 or 2 novels I've come up with the title first and the story later. But to be honest, I usually come up with titles in the first 10,000, 20,000 words of a book. And I usually expect that to be a working title. I'm like, oh, I'll change this later. This is just what came to me now, but I'll put it in so I have something to title the document. And then it often just sticks. I try later. I'm like, I should come up with a better title, but nope. I'm usually stuck with what I first came up with. The strongest counterexample to that, however, is my Victoria Marmot series, where I named Victoria Marmot has been Victoria Marmot the entire time, but the original series title was Victoria Marmot Average Teenage Girl. And then the next book was going to be Victoria Marmot Average Teenage Were Leopard, and then the next one was going to be Victoria Marmot Average Teenage something else. I can't remember what it was, but basically all of those were clunky. My husband hated them, which isn't always like the best. He's not my target audience for a lot of my books, so that's not always the best indicator. But usually when he like really doesn't like something, it's a sign that I should probably consider something else. And then I wound up pulling on my editor helped me come up with titles, and actually Corey did too, that were a mix of they were like Harry Potter spoofs, because part of the series is a little bit of parody of Harry Potter stuff, and so they're all Victoria Marmot and the whatever. But that's the only time I've completely changed a working title into something else. But yeah, I don't have to have the title to start, weirdly. I do usually, like, I have to have a main character with a name before I write anything, but the titles are less of a thing for me. But I totally get it, like just that needing to name the document something, because the number of times that I've lost something because it was like, oh, it was originally untitled whatever, and now crap. Yeah, the number of novels that have started as NaNoWriMo 2007, NaNoWriMo 2008, and then I have to try to like go back and rename everything is very frustrating. So we sort of touched on this already. You had been writing novels and you shifted into writing short stories, and that was largely just to change things up, or what was the impetus behind that?
I set myself up again to fail in because I love to do that. In 2018, well, okay, so in 2018, I was what I deemed to be superwoman, because I wrote an entire novel, 90,000 plus words, in 13 days.
Nice.
And I thought I was invincible. And I said, based on this invincibility, in 2019, I am going to write and release 4 novels and 5 novellas. Ooh. Easy. If I could write a full-length novel in 13 days, Virginia, listen, okay, follow me here. How hard could it be to write and release all of that? I mean,
the and release portion is the part of the equation that you are.
So see, what had happened was,
okay, yeah, lay it on me.
I wrote the first 2 novels, and I was feeling good, and then what threw me was I discovered SPFBO. And I actually entered, was it last year? It might have been last year, but I wasn't sure if the novel that I was going to enter was going to be good enough. And so my original goal, which I had like a 5-year plan etched out for my novels, where I was going to release, like, within 5 years, I was releasing 20 novels that was going to amass 3 different series. One of them epic, where each book was going to be like 350,000 words for this trilogy. I had covers. I had family trees. I had maps. Like, I was ready to go.
You were.
I had it in the palm of my hand. I had it. And then my idea was to release the entire first series first, which was a 5-book series with 5 novellas, one novella attached to each book.
Oof.
And I got to the 3rd book, and halfway through the 2nd novella, discovered SPFBO, and I said, Daxton's not good enough for a first book. I need to go back and find another series amongst the 60 that I had amassed,
planned out,
and find one that would be good enough to go in. And I found one, and then I said, well, damn, if I stop in the middle of like trying to release an entire series to start a brand new series, that's going to be out of order of the sequence of events in my life and in this world that I've been living in for the last like 2 years. And I burned out, and I crashed, and I burned, and it was ugly. I had the whole issue with Amazon where I did a pre-sale, and you know what happens when you don't do a pre-order. You can't do anything for a year.
Right.
And it was just a massive accumulation of depression and despair I was Superwoman, and then I was like, I can't.
You were your own kryptonite.
I was. And so but I didn't want to stop writing because I love writing. And so I needed to find a way to write, but not to be my own worst enemy.
You had to push aside
So I said, and full disclosure, which I didn't mention, I actually wrote more than 23 stories this year. And
you lied to me. No, I'm just kidding.
I left some out. But I feel like I can't lie. So while my intention was to write self-contained stories every week, by February, I wanted to write a web serial. And the very nature of a web serial is that it's a continuation of the previous episode.
Right.
And so I started writing a web serial that was injected every month called Shenandoah, which was going to be brilliant sci-fi. I never wrote sci-fi before. I was going to release 2 every month. It was going to be awesome. No, it wasn't awesome because there was too many gaps in between each episode where I was writing a completely different self-contained story. Right. So by the time I would get back to the thing, I had to remember the previous things. And then on top of that, I decided I wanted to write a murder mystery.
Because why stop at 3 different really unattainable goals? Not unattainable, but challenging.
Which was supposed to be a 12-part series. So I was gonna now I went from writing a self-contained story every week to only writing 1 self-contained story every month, because 2 were for Shenandoah. And then now 1 was going to be for the murder mystery, and there's only 4 weeks in a month, so I left myself only once.
Did you forget that calculation initially?
In any event, that was a huge fail as well, and so I don't count those.
Okay.
While they were written, they shall not be mentioned.
No.
Or I put them in an archive folder because I have like 10 different archive folders, because everything, the second I don't want to see something, archive, move it in there.
Well, that's fair.
So this morning I actually finally archived those stories because I said clearly they were a mistake of 2020, and I will just forget that I thought I could do something so silly.
Fair enough.
I should have stuck to my guns, which was self-contained every week. No continuation, which is what I am doing in 2021.
Okay, you're back to the original challenge. Okay.
Yes, but it won't be every week. It's only going to be 2 a week.
Okay.
2 a month.
2 a month.
Sorry.
2 a month.
2 a month. Yeah.
That's awesome. Week. I mean, to be perfectly clear, any single one of these goals is super impressive. And falling shy of them is still impressive because it's still more writing than most people do in a lifetime. Crammed.
It is. I just hate not finishing something.
I get it.
And it was so ambitious, and I was so excited. And then I discovered I'm not really a sci-fi writer. So while the idea was cool that I had for this web serial, it's not my thing. I don't read sci-fi. I mean, my only knowledge of sci-fi is like Star Trek Voyager. So it's like, you know, I there was only but so far I was going to get trying to write sci-fi, even though that's not the extent of sci-fi. Sci-fi is so much more than like going into starship and in space and stuff. I do realize that, but it just wasn't my thing at the time. I really need to stay self-contained, one story, no continuation.
Okay, fair enough. Whatever works for you is the right choice.
Well, I am going to do an anthology next year.
Oh, cool.
Because I discovered a little hiccup in how I can keep what I want, but not really do what I want, which is with an anthology, they're usually a theme.
Right.
And so I cannot do a continuation, but a theme of stories that are all horror or all, you know, but characters won't be in the same story moving along. So I'm going to try that and see if that gives me a little bit of what I seem to always gravitate towards and then regret later.
Fair enough. Speaking of anthologies, you seem to have written a number of stories in some, I was looking through Amazon and saw that you'd written some stories for anthologies in the Underrealm.
Yeah. So
do you want to talk
Garrett Garrett Robertson Garrett Robinson. I'm sorry, I mispronounced his name. He has been writing for many, many years, and he's been streaming. And a combination of him and other streamers was what got me into doing it myself and feeling that that it was worth doing. Cool. And so he's written over a dozen stories already. And he and I became close friends, and he wanted to, his grand goal is to be a publisher of indie authors who are in, you could say, the minority, who are not represented in you know, traditional or indie published world as much as they should be, such as Black, gay, transgender, disabled, all of that. And so he had reached out to me and asked if I wanted to write a story in his world. He wants to do something like Marvel, where you have this big universe and anyone can write in it. If they want to. So he has Underrealm, and anyone can write in Underrealm. You can use characters he's already created, or you could create your own within the world he's already created. Nice. And so he asked, and I said, sure, why not? And it was just a short story, so you know, it worked out pretty well. And so he put me in his collection with a bunch of other authors. Antoine Vandelay is one that I told you about. He's in that that collection as well.
Cool.
He's written a story for him. And I actually am in the middle of writing a short story for Antoine for his world.
Oh, cool.
It's been a year in the making, because when he asked me, these things had not taken place in the world as we know it.
Right.
So it's been taking me longer than I had anticipated to write, but eventually I will have a short story written in his world, because he saw that and he said, would you like to do that? And I said, sure.
Nice.
And I probably will be writing a full-length novel, not 2021, but like maybe 2022 or later.
Yeah.
In Garrett's world.
Oh, cool.
We've been discussing it and going back and forth, but I explained to him, like, the drug has not worn off for me on the stresses that I recall from writing novels.
Fair enough.
You know, and so I just can't go there right now.
Yeah.
But eventually I will have grown and learned from the experience, where I won't allow myself to get to the point of despair, and I will be able to write a novel again.
Yay.
yeah. But now it's just short stories.
Yeah, that's totally fair.
Yeah.
And a very, like, it's super healthy of you to recognize what that was doing to you, and healthy ways to still keep writing what you love and not put yourself through that again. I really respect that. That's excellent. I feel like as a society, we lean a little too hard into but make things, you know, instead of embracing like, yeah, make things, but not if it's to your detriment, right? Like, like not, you know, if, yes, you can write novels and you can write them well and quickly, but like, but if that winds up making you unwell, then, or you know, that's not something you need to keep forcing yourself to do. And
and I think for the purpose of like my social media brand, and doing the research that I had done on many indie authors, you, for instance, I know much about you before you even approached me. So when you did, I was like, I'm not going to tell her that I've been like kind of stalking her website and looking at her books and her social media to see how she does what she does. But I'm just going to say, yeah, sure, I'll pitch in, no problem.
Well, very well done, because I had no idea until just now.
I looked at people who I felt had been doing it a while and were, you know, some people who were living off of being a writer and who weren't, and you know, what were the similarities, what were the differences, and I can sprout out like maybe 20 people that I'm still tracking consistently to see, you know, over time how they changed and evolved. And one of the main things I saw was your brand, and the other thing that I saw was your content. So, you know, by the time you become someone who you don't realize people actually know you, even though you don't know them. Like, let's say me, for instance, it's because you have a number of titles out. And so, you know, the more titles you are able to have out on Amazon and that spread the word about who you are, the more, you know, tweets you have that other people are retweeting, then you become closer, or you get closer to what your end goal is, which is to be making a living off of what you're doing. And so my ambition came from, I want to be where they are, but I don't want to take as long as they took. Right? You know, Garrett took 5 to 7 years. You know, some people usually it's like that 5 to 7 year thing where in that time you're building your library of your work, and you know, so you have that to present. So every time you release a new book, people go back to your old stuff and they buy forward. So I'm well aware of that whole gamble. But my thought process was, if I spent 6 months in 2018, wrote 5 novels and 5 novellas, and then slowly release them over time in 2019. During that time of releasing things I had already written, I would be now writing another huge complement of books, and I would just be recycling and pushing out, and people would never know, and everyone would say, how is she doing it? It's just brilliant. Oh my God, so many books. And 5 years later, I'd have a library of 30 titles, and it would just be like, ah. And I try to do what others have done in 5 years and condense it into like a year and a half. And there was my downfall, right? So I realized I've got to do the grunt work, whether you're starting in 2020 or you started in 2005. The technology advances, but the grunt work is the same. Like you still have to put in the work of failing and learning how to write better every time, and you know, learning how to, you know, tell a story better and faster, and all of these things. And I can't possibly speed it up just because technology is better. I can get the newest gadget, but it's not going to make me write any faster. So I had one of those like come to Jesus moments where I said, well, I'm going to have to take as long as everybody else. Darn it.
Dang it. Yeah, it is. It's depressing. I mean, the funny thing is that so much of that time happens behind the scenes too, right? Like I started publishing in 2015, but I had been writing short stories and submitting them to fiction magazines for since 2004. And so there was a lot of that, and then there was, and you know, and a bunch of novels that I tucked in a drawer and was never going to publish. And I feel like just about everybody I've talked to who whose writing career is at a point where it's like, oh yeah, like some people have heard of them, is they've got the same story. It's like, whether, you know, it's it's always interesting because no matter who it is, like take R.F. Kuang as an example of people think of like an overnight, she's still in college and she, you know, is super, like her Poppy Wars trilogy is just like taken off and done amazing. But I'm sure if you asked her, you know, she's written a bajillion things that are stuck in a drawer somewhere and that she's been doing, you know, for ages before that. And meanwhile, like at every stage, like there's just so much work that happens behind the scenes. But there don't appear to be any shortcuts.
No,
like,
and
you know,
and I
you'd make so much money if there were, like, just like selling the shortcut.
Well, I thought if I researched enough of you guys, I'd be like, I'm gonna find the secret formula that's going to fast track me through all of this other stuff, and I'm gonna just figure out the clue here. And no, there is no fast track. You just gotta do it the way you want to do it.
Yeah. And I mean, your idea to like front load the writing and then release slowly afterwards is not a bad one. And there are a number of authors who make that work for them. But the thing is, you still that's still sort of the back end writing time, right? Like you have put in all that writing work beforehand, and then you release things slowly and they gain momentum, and you still like, there's still that amount of time of gaining a presence that's always going to happen. But Rob Hayes is an excellent example of that. He does a lot of front end loading for his writing, for like his recent War Eternal series that he released this fall. He wrote all 3 books like a year before their release, and then went through the process of editing and getting the covers ready and all of that. But meanwhile, by the time those came out, he was already 2 books in on another series. He just, you know, he wrote those fairly lengthy books in advance and then released them a few weeks apart, and they've gone nuts because he already has that presence on social media, and Reddit in particular has been useful to him. And so I just there doesn't seem to be a way around that part of it, that you know, you have to do it at some point. It's just, you know, a question of how visible it is, I guess. Meanwhile, Angela Board, I think, is a strong example of one book at a time, and her novels are epically long, you know, 240,000 words, and they're amazing. But she, you know, she published Fortune's Fool in 2019, and she published a novella that was meant to be a short story, but ballooned into over 40,000 words, 60,000, I think, actually. So by some people's standards, a novel, but a novella compared to her other ones. Released that this year, and is still working on the next book after Fortune's Fool, which is another 240,000 word book. And just so people who enjoyed Fortune's Fool a year ago are like, where's the next book, and they're sitting there waiting, whereas anybody who enjoyed the first book of the War Eternal series got the next book 2 weeks later, you know, and they didn't have to wait. So but it's that time happens. It's just a question of how visible. Okay, sorry. So you are on Patreon, and you, when did you join Patreon? How long have you been on it? How effective do you feel it is as a tool for writers? And let's talk.
Well, I'm all about like research. So when I was doing my research on authors, I came across Patreon and how certain authors were using Patreon. Some who are now, you know, traditional authors like Shannon McGuire or N.K. Jemisin, who still have a Patreon and are, you know, making tens of thousands of dollars every month, or you know, what have you, and to the smallest, you know, people who have Patreon and maybe have like a couple hundred. And so I again created a list of all of the writers and creators on Patreon who are doing it or using it the way I envision using it. And I would say it depends on being consistent. I think that's like the one key for me in everything from the writing all the way to the social media and to having a Patreon and having an email newsletter, that you have to be consistent. And if you're not, then everything is going to fail. And so me being inconsistent for the last 4 to 5 years has left me not meeting my goals on Patreon, on my email newsletter, on many of those things. But that doesn't mean that they can't eventually get there. So 2021, my key word is consistency. Because I try to have one word that I carry with me throughout the year. And I think that's the one that it's got to be, whether it's a positive or a negative consistent. I need to be consistent in what I intend on doing. And my Patreon, I started 3 years ago, maybe. And at the time, I couldn't even tell you like what my rewards were, what my goals were, no idea. And I kind of felt it wasn't for me. And one of the reasons was I found that a lot of the people who had Patreon had a welcome that was a YouTube video. And I am not a YouTube personality. And I'm talking about people who I consider to be like just indie authors, but who can get on camera and can say what their Patreon is and why a person should donate money in a very charismatic way. And in my mind, a writer has no charisma, no offense, but is not a camera person. that we're like shy hermits in our, respective writing areas, that we do not aim to be in front of a camera doing charismatic things like the Green brothers, like Hank Green and whatever. Like that's not our thing. Like our thing is just not wanting to be seen and doing stuff coming from the person who would stream 6 days a week.
I was going to say, you're there,
and I'd be on camera.
I'm getting mixed messages, Erica.
I know, but because I didn't have that, like that, I didn't want to do that clip of like 2-minute thing. I said, maybe this is not my platform. Like maybe this is for someone who's going to release videos. I don't know. And so I had one, but I didn't really promote it. I didn't really do anything with it. It wasn't until last year when I decided, this year, when I decided.
It's okay. This year was 20 years long, so it's fine.
That I was going to do, instead of per month, I was going to do per creation. And I figured this would be great because I do intend on releasing something every week. So if I'm consistent with that, then, I might get some patrons who will see that I'm being consistent with my every week thing. And then I realized that was just, it was too much for me to try to say, give me, $4 a month, which sounds like nothing when you think about it. But for me, it was like, I don't know. So I switched it back to monthly and I decided I'm just going to post my stories there and be consistent in if I'm going to give an update every week, I'm going to give an update every week, and just try to promote it more. I don't think I promote it as much. And that's the part that I'm not hip with. Like I feel like I was born during the technology age and era in the mid 80s to late 90s when, things like MySpace and stuff and the internet, but I feel like it's surpassed me now. So I just Twitter and Facebook and Instagram are just areas with which I have not grasped the hashtag thing. I just like, I don't hashtag enough. I don't post pictures enough. I know it's a lot to try to figure out just so that I can get, the true fan or the super fan of 1,000, right? That mythical number. If you have 1,000 true fans, you can live out your life on your work. And so, I want the true fans, but I want it without having to do the social media stuff, which is impossible
these days.
And so I was hoping that Patreon would be my way to do that. but I have to promote my Patreon. So while Patreon brings you closer to your true fan, you still need to bring your true fan to your
Patreon. Yeah.
And the only way to do that is to go where they are, wherever that is. So
presumably the end of your books, right? Like you put a link in all your stories and then
right, which I'm working on doing with my ebooks and stuff. But I think what I did was I went to Facebook groups. I tried that for like a hot minute, and I was like, I know I don't like Facebook. And then, you know, I tried Twitter. I tried the Instagram thing with doing my micro stories in a picture, which I think I might go back to that. I enjoyed doing it, even though probably no one saw it. And then,
I mean, it starts with no one, and then you slowly build up, right? Like
that's what they say, but who are these people who say that? I have yet to meet these people to give me good hard evidence. I mean, is that what happened to you? You started with no one, and then all of a sudden?
I mean, not all of a sudden, but more like the slowest trickle, like somebody left a faucet on for 5 years and it dripped once a month. And my Patreon is not a good example of anything. I have 5 people on there, one of whom is my husband. The other 4, one of them's a friend. No, now 2 of them are friends. It's like my Patreon's not an example of anything. But in terms of, let's say, book sales, because I now constantly, continually sell books to people I've never met before in my life. Every month. Like there are and it's not a huge number. When I'm advertising, it's a bigger number. Right now I'm not advertising, and so it's dozens of books every month go out to people that I've never met or heard of and haven't even spent advertising money on. So that's awesome. That's like, okay, there's enough momentum with at least Blade's Edge that it's out in the world being purchased by people. But that like it's all just come slowly. Nothing worked until I stopped trying to sell my books or my meme brand.
And I think that's where I am right now, where I'm less interested in getting followers and getting patrons as I am in meeting my goal of 2 stories a month, every month.
Yeah.
And exiting 2021 into 2022, looking back and saying 24 stories. Hooray.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's really, it becomes that sort of game, right? Like you have to, there are some people like, apparently it can be done where you like study the social media algorithms and turn it to your advantage, but I don't have any idea of how that's done. I've read about it and it still doesn't seem like an attainable goal unless you want to legit make social media your job, which I do not. I have no interest in doing that. And so because I want writing to be my job, I have instead focused on the one form of social media that I actually enjoy, which is a very, very catered Twitter feed, like a curated rather Twitter feed. Catered, that'd be nice if people showed up with food. A curated Twitter feed, which is mostly writing related. Of course, the writing community there's a huge overlap with the activism community, so that's great. But basically, my entire Twitter feed is social justice and books, and that's awesome. And then I am just myself pretty much on Twitter. And that's may or may not be selling books for me. It's certainly not, making me famous or anything, but it's something I can manage and people can find me there. I have a website that I update enough that at least like now it has all my current books on it. And I just set up a shop to sell books directly to people to increase profit margins for the holidays. But like it's honestly Spiffbo, like entering contests can be helpful, but it's a total shot in the dark. So it's only worth doing if you're not paying anything for them. And it's, I don't know what my Instagram followers are like. Instagram is mostly just people I actually know. Like I'm on Instagram and technically it's a writing thing. I'm Virginia McLean Writes Fantasy, but it's basically just pictures of my dog and it's actual people that I interact with.
Yeah, that's the other thing I think I struggle with is I'm not personal enough. So I find that if I looked at my Twitter feed, it's all like images of my stories with like my link to go to my Patreon.
Right.
And it's like at some point you become the thing you despise, which is someone who's just constantly promoting themselves and doing absolutely nothing else.
Right.
And so it's hard to do both, to be both personal and, hey, be a patron.
Right. I mean, honestly, I think the people who have the most success with that are just themselves on social media, and they have a link to their Patreon in their Twitter bio, and it's like, come
and
find
then
me.
Eventually someone find you.
Yeah. I mean, so I have the 3 patrons I have that I don't know personally. One of them is a person, I'm a reader that I met at a convention who I signed up for my newsletter, and then from my newsletter signed up to Patreon. Another one is a person who I have no idea exactly how he found me, but he did, and he decided he wanted to give me $20 a month. Bless him. Like it's amazing. I don't know. I have this one super patron, and he's a delightful human who's also always happy to read advanced copies of the book and let me know if he finds any mistakes. Like, yeah, he's fantastic, but I don't know how he found me. And then there's one other person again that I don't know, and that they're just there, and presumably they found me. But that's, so eventually my hope is that number will grow, and it will be more of those people who just like went out of their way to be like, how can I give Virginia more of my money to support her in writing more stories? Because that's clearly what these tiny number of people did. And I think the only way I can do that is just keep writing stories and hope to find more of those people. And I don't have a link in the back of my book to my Patreon anymore, but I used to. I need to put it back, but I got so overwhelmed with Patreon and trying to keep up with it and do the things I said I was going to do. I was like, I need to do a complete overhaul and make it where I post stuff there because I want to share things, but that the reward tiers aren't really reward tiers. They're just like you, I will put things here that I'm doing anyway, and you will support me because you think that's cool. But that's got to be the agreement, because I cannot do this scheduled content release thing. Not with a kid. Like I was okay at it before I had my daughter, but but after that it just, so so I can't do the like, it's an exchange where you're basically like paying me for a web serial, you're paying me for extra content.
And that's why I changed it from, because I felt funny about doing monthly, because it's like if I'm asking you to pay me monthly and I'm not producing anything, it's like I'm taking your money. So I did it per creation, but then doing it per creation, I was like, oh my God, if I don't create something, then I'm not going to get money.
Right.
It's like, damn it, wait. What do I do here?
It's and that's why I switched to the monthly thing, because I was like, you know what, it's just got to be like, these people are cool with giving me money because they like my stuff, and that's awesome, and I don't expect that from anyone, but from the people who are willing to do it, it is amazing, and I appreciate it so much. And that's kind of that's just where I am with that.
Just let it go. Just let it be.
Who knows how it'll change. I still would like to be more consistent. You talked about consistency, and I would still like to be more consistent just to show my appreciation for the people who are there, right? Like the 5 people who are there. I just want to be like, you people are awesome. You keep giving me, mostly $1 a month, and this one person $20 a month. Oh, you are so amazing. But like, everybody else, I would love to, I want to do things to show my support for them. So I try to let them know in advance before anything happens. Like before I tell my newsletter, before I say it on Twitter, before I do anything else, I try to announce it to them first. And that's kind of the best I can do right now. I also give them unedited chapters sometimes. I'm like, ooh, I'm working on this thing and I'm excited. Here's a chapter for you to look at. But that's kind of it for now. But I still would like to do that. I would like that to be like a twice a month thing where I'm like, here is your, twice a month, your bi-monthly.
Consistency is the root of all evil. It's difficult. I don't know if anyone is ever really as consistent as they had wanted to be.
Fair point. But it does seem to be the key to making a go of Patreon. The people, as you say, the people who I know who are really successful with it are producing a lot of consistent content. And for some of them, like you mentioned, Shannon McGuire, I'm a patron of hers, and
see,
she's
everyone is a patron of hers. She's got like almost 7,000 patrons.
It's a lot, and it's but it's like I love her work. I've read the majority of her catalog, not any of her horror stuff, because I am a horror wuss for reading. My imagination is far too vivid, and I have nightmares for months if I read things that are actually scary. So, but I've read all of her urban fantasy and fantasy stuff, and I love it. And she releases a bunch of short stories and stuff there that don't go anywhere else. And I think that's awesome. But, and I wanted to do that, but I cannot do that the way my life is right now. Like I cannot make extra content for that. But apparently Shannon is like a powerhouse of writing, and she just has all this extra stuff that she writes anyway. Like as she's writing the books, she writes all these short stories to go with, and then she's like, I don't have anywhere else to put it. So, hey, Patreon, you guys can have this. At least that's the my current understanding of how that works. Right. But that, I mean, you know, that's amazing. I have some of that stuff. Like I actually do write a bunch of stuff that's backstory that doesn't actually wind up going into the books. And I plan on releasing that some way in the future, but I don't do it consistently enough to be like, oh yeah, this can now be a monthly thing on my Patreon. So I don't know. All right. But Patreon aside, social media aside, well, it's okay. We can't say social media aside because social media is a big part of it. But you have started a number of, or at least one, and I think more than one over the years, community for writers on the internet. And I've talked about writing communities on this show a number of times because it comes up often, and often the people I'm interviewing are writer friends of mine, and community is the way we know each other from online writing communities. So I think it's an important thing to talk about, and I'm very impressed with the amount of work you've done for the writing community. So can we talk about some of the communities that you've created and joined, and how those started, what they've become, and how you feel about them?
Well, the very first time I created a writing community was probably, again, going back to like 2016, 2017, when I joined Discord. And I don't really remember how I even discovered what Discord was or anything like that, but I had joined someone's Discord server. And then I decided to create my own. And at the time it was called like the Writer's Lounge. And it was fairly huge. It was very active. And, you know, my purpose for creating that community and then creating any community that I've done ever since, I keep trying to recycle what took place then, because it was like the best writing community I think I ever did in 2016. But I will mention why it failed, and I think why it will continue to fail versus what I think works better. But for my purposes, a writing community, I think, is better served when the individual is not a possible total stranger. And I think that element of stranger is what Discord brings. And so it made trying to evolve and keep that community the way it was back then difficult, because you don't, you know, people don't stay. It's a mixture of people coming and going. You can create whatever name, personality, persona you want. So unless you have the element of truth to who you are and what your purpose is in the community, it can easily crumble. And so the group that was there in 2016, where, I mean, we had fantastical ideas. We were, you know, doing community writing. So we would have a theme and a topic, and 6 of us would get together on a Google Doc and would trade off paragraphs and write stories. And we would have prompts, and people would submit to the prompt, and we were doing like a newsletter where it would be like the prompt card, and like everybody would submit their story to it, and then you could download it for free and read it. Cool. And we would grade each other's work, and you know, it was great. Fast forward now, they're all gone. It's a whole new set of people with different ideas. You can't really vet at the door, sort of thing. So, you know, you're always likely to get that person who's not wanting to be in the community, but wanting to disrupt it. So at one point it got too big. At one point I got too stressed with monitoring and managing it. I gave it away. I changed names. It came back to me, you know, so now I have it, and for all intents and purposes, it's dead. And I have tried to resuscitate it as best as I could. But again, when you have that element of anonymity and lack of truth to who you are and what you want to do, and consistency and being there, people are from all over the world. So some people might be awake and up and active, and others are awake and up and active when you're asleep. It's difficult to do. And now there are so many other Discord writing servers that I would just point people to go there, because they are more active. They have solved the riddle, but they will all say the same thing I say, which is there are times where it's getting too much, too big. How do we control it? How do we rein it in? Who do we have to kick? You know, you have to kick people, ban people, the whole thing. But the thing that worked, and I'm so upset with myself because I let the world around me detract me from it, but I'm trying to come back. I don't know if you saw on the Facebook group that I have, because I posted something like yesterday, is the SFFWA, which is the Sci-Fi and Fantasy Women Authors, which came about when I discovered newsletter swapping. Which is like, what is that? You know, and I discovered Book Funnel and the
Story
other one
Origin?
that now escapes me. Yes, Story Origin. And this whole idea, like you could create your own like group swap or group promotion. And so I created a group promotion that was just for women.
Nice.
I was like, I want to do a group promo that's just women. And I had almost 150.
Brilliant.
I think.
When I tried doing that and got like 10 people, and I was like, this is a sad group swap.
I mean, and to think I had all of those women and there was only one bad apple in the whole bunch. Because usually you'd have like, you know, people say, who do you think you are? And I can't be in it because I'm a man and all these things. But and I wasn't trying to do some social experiment or some gender thing, but I did want to know, like, why is it every promo I went into or SPFBO that's happened in the last several years, you get to the finalists and you're lucky if there's one woman.
We had 6.
You know what I mean?
In 2019.
I know.
We had 6.
I know.
It was so good.
So,
but it's 2. It's only 2 or 3 max
this year. Yeah, this year I think it's just 2.
Yeah.
So I said, you know what? Let me just see what happens. And I mean, I got a flood, so much so that I said, the only way I can communicate with all of you, let me create a Facebook group. So I created the Facebook group, and I said, you know, gave them the URL, and I said, join the Facebook group. And I wanted to continue this. I was like, I want to take this thing that took like, I don't know, 4 months to put together, because I kept getting so many people coming in to want to be a part of this promo. I created an entire webpage. I had to. Because Book Funnel, like, it wasn't going to represent all of these books the way I wanted. So I took it out of Book Funnel. I said, I'm not actually going to let the promo go live on Book Funnel or on Story Origin. Just give me your link to your book in there. And I created a separate web page, put all of the images of the books on there, and it went live in like, I think September. It was like a 2-month thing, and it went so well. And I ended up, now I have like, I don't know, 400 people in the Facebook group.
That's awesome.
And it went really well because I was doing what Rob does, Rob J. Hayes. Every month he releases a newsletter, right? With all the releases. I said, I want to do that, but it's only going to be women.
Nice.
So you could be sci-fi, fantasy, indie author, women. I'm going to release a newsletter and I'm going to spread it. And it worked because the click rate or ratio on Twitter was in the hundreds, if not thousands, when I would tweet about it.
Awesome.
And if everyone else in the group tweeted and retweeted it, it just grew exponentially. And it was doing so well. And then I stopped. It stopped. Like, it literally ground to a halt, because unlike Discord, where it's like multiple channels and all these things, Facebook is literally one timeline. It's not the same beast. It's completely different. But it is not, for all intents and purposes, laced behind anonymity. There is truth there. It's your picture, it's your name, it's your Facebook page, it's your profile. So I think that made it more serious and more intentional into what exactly I was trying to do, which was bring together a group of like-minded writers to say, let me promote your work, and let's promote each other's work, and let's do our own newsletter swaps internally in the group, our own group promos internally in the group, and let's do that. And so I do want to do an SFFWA anthology, and I asked if there's anyone who writes short stories, and then maybe at the end of next year we might be able to put together a collection that would highlight everyone.
Cool.
And 2 years ago I had done the interviews, like I wanted to interview each person, and so I created like 50 questions, and I had them all answer it. And I stopped that too. I have like a backlog of like 30 people who I never actually published the interview on my blog, because I just like I lost track of time, and I had a life. But you have to have time,
right?
And you
have to make time,
and you can't be consistent with time as much as you like, which is why it's always good to have an other,
right?
So it's not just you. And I have a problem with having another because I don't like sharing the responsibility and not knowing if what I'm sharing is going to get done.
Right.
Yeah. So until I can find that person who is as adamant and as excited and as willing to put in at least half of the time so that we can split the time.
Yeah.
It's difficult to keep those kinds of communities afloat.
Going. Yeah.
You have to be able to delegate and to have other people in your court who are willing to be there when you can't be there. And that's something I'm learning, because in Discord, I was labeled a dictator and a tyrant and a bunch of other things, but it was from strangers, and I was like, I don't know you, I can ban you right now. So I had to learn
that seriously, like, who has patience for that, right? Like, bye.
You can't treat people like peasants, which is in a way what I was doing. And Discord gives you the ability to feel like you are a dictator. That's what it does. And if you don't rein yourself in or have people around you to tell you don't do that, like moderators, which I never have had, or I did have when it was the good year. I had mods. I'm sorry, Virginia, you would have wished you were there. It was
I believe it.
We were the largest Discord writing group at the
amazing.
time. And we were envied by other writing groups who wanted to get to the numbers that we were at, of like 4,000 members and everything else.
Wow.
But it got too big. People left, mods left. I was by myself. I became a dictator. It failed. It crashed and burned.
Sure.
So, communities are great. I would love to join a community and not start one, but I am the personality that the second I join a community, I'm just like, I could help you with that and we could make that better. Like, I hope when you had come to me to do like the tech stuff, I was trying really hard not to be like, Virginia, just give me the keys and I'll drive the car.
I should have just let you reconfigure the Discord, which I'm now going to have to do before we do next year's, because I make it a single server instead of the 5 that I created, because I had no idea how Discord worked.
Let me tell you, that drove me nuts. I was like, because my wife actually runs one of the largest screenwriting Discord.
Oh yeah.
And so I was just like, do you know what she did? She created a separate Discord for each thing.
I didn't know. It's so easy to create a new server. I was like, this is clearly not a big deal. And I had no idea what channels were like. I was in 2 like NaNoWriMo Discords before that. And I was like, I don't know how any of this works. I barely showed up to those. But anyway, but I get it now, and I know how to fix it, and I will fix it. But I just have to actually sit down and spend an hour fixing it.
Because I was just, but I've always been that leader person, and it's very hard for me to sit on my hands and just be a spectator and just be a participant. I've always wanted to start something. I mean, back in 2016, I actually had a workshop for short fiction and novels. And I will say that was amazing, because 5 people wrote full-length novels from beginning to end in 3 months.
That's awesome.
And I had 20, you could say, graduates who wrote several short stories in that time. And I went through the outlining process. We went through writing a synopsis.
Yeah.
And I think I got the teacher aspect from my mom, who was a teacher. She was a high school English teacher. So so for me, I always want to impart the lesson, teach how to do something, show you the steps,
right?
You know, and do that. And it was difficult for me to do that in Discord after that 1 year, because there were too many negative people
right
who came in
and they just wanted to poop on everything instead of actually participate.
You know, who was I'm not, you know, Brandon Sanderson. How dare I think I can teach how to write an outline, you know, that sort of
outline,
thing.
People.
I'm not holding your gun to your head. There's 20,000 different ways to write an outline.
This is just one of them. Yeah.
But I love the idea of a community and organizing one. And I'm going to really focus on the SFFWA community.
Nice.
And try to bring in more female writers, because I know that they're out there in sci-fi and fantasy, and try to do another promo. The only issue that I am finding with BookFunnel and with Story Origin is there isn't a short story anthology thing like promo, you know,
right? Like recruit people application type deal,
right? Because I have a short
Google
story.
Forms.
It's like how do I enter into and say, let's swap my short story with your novel? I feel like there isn't something that caters to that. And I sent an email to the owner or the creator of Story Origin to tell him, you know, it would be nice. There are a lot of indie authors who write short fiction and probably have anthologies or even just short stories. If there was a way to just filter for that, so that we could have our own group promo that's a collection of short stories, and not finding that one collection of short stories in a big group of other novels, because there is no way.
I think they've made it. I mean, I know, like, you can, when you create a promo there now, you can make the theme whatever you want. And I think one of the things you can search for now is short stories, because I thought I saw not too long ago a promotion that was just for short stories, and I was like, oh yeah, I should put my short story collection there, and I didn't, because whatever reasons. But I do think it's possible now. I know it wasn't a while ago, and there are a lot of promos that are like, please don't enter short stories, like we just want full-length novels. But I think you can, if you create a new promotion, I think you can make it not like, you could say like, this is just for short stories, but then you have to do a sort of manual check on that. I don't know that there's just like an automated thing where it could be like, only accept short stories. That would be a different I guess that would be a useful tool. In fact, actually, that would be a useful thing in general, if they had better filters for that.
I feel like that's what's missing. So I think his name is Evan something. So I contacted him.
Yes. Evan at Story Origin. Yeah. No idea what his last name is, because his emails always just say Evan from Story Origin. Like, okay. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay. I think as we wind down here, because we've covered the majority of the actual questions, we're going to get back into the frivolous a little bit. So I've noticed, as I was stalking social media for you the other day, that you seem to be maybe on a search for the perfect Christmas movie.
Well, as you know, we have been living in trying times. It is the end of days, as we know it. So my wife and I have been on this, like, every night, if there's not a football game on or something, it's kind of like, what Christmas movie do you want to see?
Okay.
And so, yes, we literally just like signed up to Netflix.
All right.
Only so that we could watch the sequel, The Chronicles, and then Jingle Jangle. But and I decided to review them because they're new movies, and I like to review movies every now and again when I watch them and I feel they're worth reviewing. I think the last movie I reviewed before that was like Cats. So that just shows you how often I watch a new movie worth reviewing.
Yeah.
But yeah, she and I are like, okay, what Christmas movie are you gonna watch? You know, last night we watched the year they saved Christmas, which was literally a 1984 movie, which is the year I was born.
Yeah.
And so, we're going to end up watching all of the classic, White Christmas, which is probably my favorite Christmas movie that must be seen at Christmas time. But yeah, I mean, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, we're gonna watch. Nice. Home Alone must, we're just gonna watch them all. But yeah, we saw that they had those 2 Christmas movies, so we kind of spaced them out one day after the other to watch them. And Christmas Chronicles 2, thumbs up. Jingle Jangles, thumbs down. Sorry,
that's too bad.
Not that good. Not that good. I expected more. I expected a bit better. I don't know. Just wasn't there.
We have questions. And comments.
I was gonna ask, should one of us be looking at YouTube, because I totally do not have YouTube open, so I don't know if anything might be happening at all.
I've been checking. Silent Willow.
I know Silent Willow. He shows up to my streams every now and again.
He asked, I think this was in relation to the promotion that you were talking about for short stories, because timing is not these are not marked clearly for timing, but asked would that be for women writers only as well.
When I do any promos and stuff, it's in the group and I do vet that one, and so I have had some issues with people being upset that I am vetting that you're a woman coming into the women's group. But I do vet that Facebook group to make sure. And I've toyed with the idea of moving it into Discord, but like I said, because Discord cannot, in my estimation, be properly vetted, unless I made the Discord group private and then only sent that link to the women in that group to be sure that they were coming in from that Facebook group. To me, it's just not worth it. It seems to be working now being in the Facebook group.
Right.
So I'm just going to leave it there. And I'm going to try to, gamble on Discord again, because I do have big ideas that I think only something like Discord could handle.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a matter of getting it done. I mean, I have an idea for a publication of my own called Storyzine, which I did in 2017, again, from the first iteration of my Discord server. Which did a full year of publications free. And the idea was to try to build the newsletter for up and coming writers of fiction of any length. But if you have a short story, that'll give people an entryway into what your kind of writing is.
Right.
And if they like it, they can then click the link and join your newsletter.
Right.
But there were naysayers, of course, about it.
Yeah.
So it's trying to block out the naysayers and just forge ahead can be difficult. True. Especially if you're a one-woman show, which I usually am. So
totally fair.
On that.
Yeah. That is, sorry, I was looking at, we had questions. I got bouncing between my questions and questions from the audience. Misty 306 is here. Hey, Misty. Misty, you will probably remember, was at every single CorinCon event, and she pretty much has made it to every single CorinCon Cubed interview as well.
So she is checking on you, making sure you're on your toes.
That's right. Always there. I now I'm refraining from using Misty's actual name, because I figure if she wanted that public, she would change it. But I now actually friends with the person behind Misty 306 on Facebook and and know who she is. She's an awesome human. But yeah, good to see you, Misty. Thank you so much for making it. And AF Stewart is here, who also has made it to a ton of our events and was part of CorinCon on some panels. And she says Evan Gow is the last name we were looking for, GOW.
Yeah, I'm a member of the Facebook group, so I usually will message him on Facebook directly.
Okay. And then AF also agrees that White Christmas is awesome. So those are the comments up to now. We'll do, I think we're at an hour and 40 or an hour 35. We started a little bit late right now. Mm-hmm. So I think we'll do one more. Oh, well, no. Well, okay. the more important question. We'll skip the frivolous questions, and instead I will just ask, do you have any upcoming publications that you would like to let people know about? We've talked a fair bit about your 2021 plans in the sort of broader scheme, but what do you want people to look for? In the description, there's a link to your Amazon page and a link to your Patreon. What do you want to give people a heads up about?
I think if you could throw in there a link to my actual website, because that's where you can find my short stories. So if you click on there's a big banner that says Friday Fiction. That's what I call it. And it'll drop down and show you, I said I have like 23 stories that I wrote this year. So all 23, actually not all 23, because some of them are going to release later this month. Because I'm trying to soft release them later on, ending with the first reindeer, which, as you can imagine, is a Christmas story.
I would assume, although you never know, that could be horror.
It could be, but yeah. So if you click on them, you can actually read them for free. And what I just started doing, and I'm not done yet, is I use this. I don't know if you've heard of Gumroad, Gumroad. So I'm using Gumroad as a way, if people don't want to do Patreon, where it's like a commitment every month to give a certain amount, that you can read my story for free on my site. But if you want it as like an EPUB or a Mobi file, then you can click the Gumroad thing and pay 99 cents for the story and get the EPUB and the Mobi file. So I'm slowly incorporating that into each story, but they're all free to read on there. I will be putting back my microfiction and my flash fiction. I took them off the site because I was trying, I'm constantly changing my site. I change my site, I feel like once a year. This is the first time this site has remained the same from 2019 going into 2020, since I've been building websites back in like 2008, I don't even know, but I'm trying to like work with what I have and I'm trying to do a one pager.
Right.
Some people have like the multiple pages. I'm trying to contain everything on one page. But I do want to put back, you made me realize like the microfiction is important, and it reminded me that I do love those, and that I really am impressed with how I was able to tell a story through them. And I actually recorded them, but I never made it as a podcast. My intention right before everything went crazy in June, July, I actually recorded myself reading every microfiction. And my intention, because they were like literally 45 seconds to read, was to put them all together, and you could listen to 30 microfictions in one episode. And I never got to the editing part of it. They're just a file sitting in my audition folder. But you know,
now you can make them each into a TikTok.
I don't know how to do that. My brother just learned.
I don't know either.
I'm too old. I'm too old for TikTok, Snapchat, WhatsApp. I'm too old for that. Leave me with my Twitter and my Facebook. I feel like the newest tech that I know is Instagram, because it's not as old as the previous two, but I can't do that stuff.
WhatsApp is really just text messaging. I don't think it does anything else. Like,
I think my Patreon will probably in 2021 be the one place to really look for me, because as I told you, I'm going to start submitting to magazines and things, and I'm looking at like the rules and regulations on how that works. In terms of submitting and also posting it free for everyone to read is kind of like, I can't do that until after. I believe, if I'm reading it right, that like if they choose it and publish it, then after the fact I can share it free and then link back to the publication that published it. Because they consider it to be published even if I publish it just on my site. So what I'm going to do is share it with my patrons only. So if it's a story that I share, because I don't think that falls under the same category.
It does for a lot of publications, so double check. But Patreon has become ubiquitous enough now. I have actually seen it mentioned in licensing agreements with short story fiction.
Because I was thinking if I just shared it with my patrons and not publicly, then it wouldn't be considered published.
Well, except that someone, like in that case, they're counting it as someone having paid for access to it. So I think they consider that even more published than if it's just on your blog. So I unfortunately, the places that are buying exclusive First North American serial rights will probably not accept something that's been published on your Patreon, although how they will know, I don't know.
Unless they watch this YouTube video.
Right now, you've ruined it.
But in any event, I do plan on I've always, like you said, release it to your patrons first and then everyone else later. So I've always done that where my patrons will get it. Usually I do, my patrons get it a month in advance.
Nice.
So you get it for like 4 weeks early, and then I do a release a month later, and then everyone gets to read it. But this time I will be holding back the stories that I intend on releasing, and I'll probably just give like a synopsis on what that is, so people know, like, I just, submitted this story to these places, and let's see what happens. But my hope is that I get into something like, the one I'm really trying for is the fantasy and science fiction.
Nice.
One
I'm waiting on a submission.
Which comes out like every 2 months. So I just have this one, and I'm like, I'm gonna try to submit to that and a couple of other ones. So we'll see.
FNSF Mag is like the big fish. I have a number of rejection slips from them. I have a story submitted to them as we speak that I have marked on my calendar. Tomorrow's the first day I can follow up with them, because they have an 8-week before follow-up policy. So I might be emailing the editor tomorrow, or I might still give it another week and see. But I thoroughly I always expect a rejection from them, but this story got rejection from an assistant editor with a tiny, slightly personalized message from its last submission. So I'm hopeful that someone might take it. But yeah.
So you're writing short stories. I thought you said you weren't.
I generally am not. This is the first short story I've subbed in 5 or 6 years. Actually, that's not, I occasionally write something that I'm like, oh, I'll submit this to a couple magazines and see what happens. The last time I had a short story published was by a professional magazine was 2006. It's been a long time. But I wrote a short story after my mom died that is very much about that. And it actually felt solid enough that I decided to submit it to a couple traditional rags. And this is the FNSF is the third try. I went backwards from the way I normally do it. I sent it to a magazine I'd never heard of the first time, and then one I'd heard of a little bit the second time, and then I was like, well, they both rejected it, so now I'm just gonna go for the Hail Mary and send it to FNSF and see what they say. Then we'll see. It was, like I said, the second time it got rejected, it was like, oh, this was, not what we were looking for, but we'd love to see more from you. I'm like, okay, cool. That's a nice note. So I will. We'll see.
I have a few that I'm working on right now that I'm outlining that I think would be right up the alley. So I'm going to try it. My first time. I'm not expecting any miracles.
I honestly love collecting rejection slips from actual fiction magazines, because it feels like that in and of itself feels like an accomplishment. You're like, I did the thing. I submitted it.
Because everyone doesn't do that.
Yeah. And it's a rite of passage too, and it's just like, yeah, that's right. I got rejected.
And that's why I entered SPFBO last year, because it was like, I knew that Daxton wasn't ready. I knew that it wasn't going to be good enough. And lo and behold, I ended up being in the group of a blog that even if you don't make it, they still do a mini review, which so I wasn't expecting a mini review. Where they said I wasn't ready, and everything they said was absolutely true. They really they trashed it and said it was like really not good, which I knew. But at the same time, I was like, okay, I just entered just to enter. I didn't know that you were going to mini review the damn thing. You were just supposed to not pick it and move on. How dare you?
I should have attached a note.
I should have said,
if you reject my book, please don't talk about it. Yeah.
Right. Just let it be. Move on. But I did it just so that I could say that I did it, and that I was one of the 300.
Yeah. Hey. One of 300. It's it's a good little box to check. I mean, the chances of getting anywhere in SPFBO are so
it's a toss up.
It's just an odd combination of luck, right? Like you have to have a book that's ready, whatever you want to call that, and then have it land in front of one of the bloggers that's actually going to enjoy it, right? Because every blogger's tastes are so particular, and they need
to. And even with the groups, they change them sometimes. So you might not even get the same group but a different reader because they have new people. You just it doesn't fit in everyone's cup of tea. So
there are no guarantees in SPIFBO, and there's just no, like, I mean, honestly, you know, for what it is, I think they do a great job, and I will forever be appreciative of that competition, but it's just so much of it is down to luck, as it always is, right? Like, if you enter any competition, there's always going to be slush pile readers, and those people are getting rid of things for all kinds of reasons, from too many typos to I don't like the way that character said this line and I needed something to get rid of this thing because I can only choose these small numbers. So yeah, it's just so down to luck. I mean, I'm thoroughly convinced that if Blade's Edge had been in a different blog than the Quillery, it would not have moved forward to the finals and may not have even moved into the semifinals. You know, like it's so down to luck as far as that goes. Well, at this point, we are at the hour and
you failed.
45 minutes.
Although I don't think you actually failed, because we did get through almost all the questions.
We did. We actually did.
While we may have not stayed within the time constraints,
but we did get through all the questions. We did not do the frivolous questions. I left off 2 of the frivolous questions, but I feel like that's okay.
You want to ask me one before we go and on a frivolous note? Just
all
one.
Right. Okay. Let's go. Which one do you prefer? I don't know. All right, fantasy animal companion. If you had to choose just one fantasy animal companion, what would you choose?
I said I knew she's going to ask me this, because then I'd have to be like, can you define fantasy animal companion? Like,
no, I cannot.
Like in a specific fantasy.
No, in from anywhere. Like you can go for anything from like a dragon to a diamond to a magical talking snake, an invisible dwarf that
not to promote my own book that I haven't published.
But please do.
In the 3rd book of the series that I only got halfway through finishing, I introduce a demon dolphin.
Yes.
And
demon dolphin. Does it shoot lasers out of its eyes?
And so no, it was trained to eat mermaids. And so it became possessed and now like seeks out. So any mermaid that goes against the Mer Queen is thrown into this little like lake type area where the demon dolphin lives. And so that's what it eats. And so
it eats sacrificial merfolk.
Why would I want that as a companion? I mean, when I don't want to be interrupted, it's always good to bring your demon dolphin along. So people will leave you alone.
And now we know what happened to everyone you didn't like in the Discord servers.
I threw them in the little pond with the demon dolphin. Yeah. But
that is what you get, people. So be nice when you're on Discord servers, because if you're rude, you will be fed to a demon dolphin.
Yeah, the 3rd book cover is like so badass too. I hired an illustrator, the whole thing, but someday soon, I'll be able to introduce people to the demon dolphin. And
I look forward to reading about the demon dolphin. Does it get its own character arc, or is it just there?
Yes, it does, because it's a part of the Mer Queen's story as well. So and the Mer Queen basically created the demon dolphin, and then does it turn against her? We'll never know. But it's a part of the thing about how that dolphin, who was nice and a lovable type, flipper type dolphin,
just trying to live its life, and
actually it comes from the fact that people don't realize that dolphins are actually deadlier and more dangerous than sharks. People don't realize that, but they actually are.
Yeah.
So I said
they're wicked smart, so they can like trick you. Yeah,
I'm gonna create a demon dolphin because people are expecting a kraken or some sort of evil looking thing, and I was like, I'm gonna put in a cute and lovable fish and make it a demon.
Demon sea otter would have been like the next level. It'd be like really cute and just so evil would be really. But I like that. I like that you made evil.
It would take a sea otter a long time to eat a mermaid. So I think
But if it's a demon sea otter, would it though? Because don't you think you could give it like lava breath, or
it grew 10 times its size? I don't know, but I just feel like a dolphin is big enough.
Okay.
Even though it's got the thin, long beak
it's
but
fair.
Anyway.
The potential is more built into the dolphin. I'll give you that.
Right. I'll give you that. Okay. Good frivolous last question.
Solid. Okay. With an excellent frivolous last answer. All right. Well, let's see. Misty says dolphins are mammals, not fish. Yeah. I don't think we said it was a fish, did we? But they eat fish. They eat fish.
I mean, they live in the sea, as far as I know.
Why does the title "Does the Demon Dolphin" sound like a segment from The Simpsons Treehouse of Horrors? Good question, Misty. I don't know why, but you're right. It does. All right, everyone. In particular, Erica, thank you so much for joining me. This was delightful. Thank you very much for your time. I have posted a link to your website in the permanent comments that are down below.
Okay. Sweet.
And your other links remain in the description. I can go back and edit the description so that the website's in there too, but it's all there under the video now. And so everyone should go check out Erica's work, check out her Patreon, check out her website for all of her short stories. I'm putting that in quotation marks, since some of them are apparently up to 10,000 words long. And yeah, thank you so much for your time. It was really lovely to have you. Thank you everyone for showing up. The handful of people we've had watching, it's so delightful to see you all. Thank you for being here and watching, and I hope you'll all check out Erica's work. And that's it for this week. We'll be back next week with I was going to say renowned physicist, but that's a total lie. But with theoretical physicist Tom McLean, who happens to be my brother. And we'll be asking him questions. So make sure you come back for that on Wednesday of next week. Thank you, everyone. This has been CorinCon. We still have merch and you can still buy it. And that'll help me pay for the Zoom, which I've been paying for all year long. And that's about it. I'm going to stop talking now. Bye-bye. How do I don't have the buttons. Okay, really goodbye. There we go.
You have exit music in the background.
Yeah, that's my husband.